there's a ton of storylines we're going to be following and writing about throughout the spring here. And I'm excited just to kind of get to know a lot of these new faces in the lineup and just kind of hear the way these guys talk. And then some of those young pitchers, right? The high expectations. Can they not only repeat what they did last season, can they take a step forward? And so just for the team itself, I do think I'm a little more bullish now that I kind of take a step back and had a couple weeks here to digest all the changes and look at the lineup and see what some of the projections are. I think I'm maybe as bullish as anybody about this team's chances this year. And so I'm curious to see how that starts to take shape down in spring training.
So that's a pretty good segue. After everything the Mariners have now done this offseason, it didn't start out on a very positive note. I think everybody knows that. But now for where they sit here in early to mid-February, how would you grade what they've done?
Yeah, I think this is about as good a job as the front office could have done, considering the constraints that they were under. Again, it was 10 days into the offseason. I mean, season ends October 1st. It was October 10th that Xfinity, made its announcement. They were basically doubling the price of the regional sports route package, and then the backdrop of all that too. And this is something I think Mariners ownership knew was coming down the pike for a while now. But they're taking full ownership of route sports too, and that doesn't necessarily dramatically change things in terms of their financial outlook. It just kind of all came to a head it seemed like at one time, and at perfectly the wrong time for this organization with what they've been through and what they've done over the last 5 years. If you kind of take out last offseason and the moves they made last offseason out of the picture, I mean, I think they've done just about everything right in this rebuild. I mean, you just look at when you have to start over something like this, there's no guarantee you're going to pick the right prospects or find the right international signings or make the right trades. And again, they're not 100%, but I think the step-by-step process just to build a contender and then get to this point where obviously we can all see it, that looks like a team, a core foundation that is ready to pop. And what's the last thing you need? You need to supplement that with a couple key pieces. You need to spend at least a little bit, right? What could this lineup still use right now? It's some middle order to pop, a $25 million bat right now. And I think everyone would probably be pegging them as the favorite in the AL West. As it is, right? They've had to kind of piecemeal that together. And boy, what an offseason it's been. It's been strange. It's just been a roller coaster. And I know a lot of fans are still frustrated. You hear fans talk about, I'm not coming back until ownership, this and that. And I get that. That's totally valid. It's totally fair feeling and frustration to have right now too. But I think if you can kind of separate kind of some of the financial issues and what ownership has decided to do versus what front office has been able to achieve and able to accomplish with those constraints. Again, I feel like they've done about as good a job as you can do. Again, there may be a couple different bats or a couple different trades that maybe they could have swung or maybe pulled off, but not having to give up one of those two young pitchers or any of those young pitchers was a real priority for them. And I didn't think they'd be able to achieve it. I thought they would have to give up Miller or Wu to go get one of those middle order bats. And maybe that still, in hindsight, will be the right move if it was a legitimate Randy Arozarena type that we look back in 6 months and say that was still the one thing they're really missing. But again, you're kind of, trading from a strength to bolster a weakness. In the end, you only end up, 2 wins better anyway. Maybe it's all a wash. So long story short, yeah, I think they did a really good job just getting to this point. Obviously, it's a high variance, high risk approach with, we can get into all the, injury issues a lot of these new guys have had, and they're banking on these guys staying healthy. They do have some insurance a little bit for some of them. I don't think anyone expects Mitch Haniger, for example, to play, 130 games. They're not projecting that. They're not expecting that. But again, you need, 5 of the 6 new additions to really play 130 games. And maybe that's asking a lot, and maybe ultimately it's asking too much. But I do like the dynamic nature of what they've been able to achieve in this lineup and giving Scott Servais some flexibility at the very least.
Now, it's hard to get fans to agree on anything, an off-season grade, an acquisition, et cetera, et cetera. But what about some of the players that were outspoken towards the end of last season? I mean, how do you think Cal Raleigh approaches walking into spring training and seeing the new additions around him and making the observations he needs to judge whether or not he feels like they tried hard enough?
Yeah. And again, I think he probably has perspective enough to know, like, and I'm sure he's had ongoing conversations with Scott Service and Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander too. Like, they want to keep those core guys involved and informed as much as possible. So, I think he probably understands the thinking on both sides of it. I think he knows where ownership is coming from too. And again, I applaud Cal Raleigh. He obviously really emerged as a team leader last year. It was Cal and JP, and I applaud Cal for speaking his mind. Again, ownership would kind of spin it a different way, but I think Cal would probably look at it as like, look, given the circumstances, we were able to make the team, the lineup, if not better, again, at least reimagined to the point where it looks like they should be able to score at least more runs, at least in a different way, right? I think they should be able to score more runs, and they should certainly be able to do it in different ways, right? They don't have to rely on the long ball as much this year. It's obviously still a big part of their game and the game in general, but it's not going to be the two true outcomes. And that was the one thing they identified, obviously, right away after the season, that they wanted to cut down on the strikeout rate, and they got rid of all three of their biggest guys, and Teo leaving for free agency, and then trading away Gino Suarez, and then Jared Kelenic too. I don't think they wanted to trade away Jared Kelenic, and I think if they didn't have the financial constraints, Kelenic would still be on this roster, but they felt like that was a necessary move to obviously free themselves up to make the other moves that came down the pike later. But again, it's reimagined. It's going to obviously have a much different look, that lineup this year. And I think if you're Cal Raleigh, if you're JP Crawford, if you're Julio Rodriguez, you can see, hey, this has a chance to be better and perhaps significantly better.
So you mentioned the injuries a couple minutes ago. When you look at this offense, I think we're all in agreement where it feels more complete with less strikeouts than it did a season ago. But that being said, like, is it a legitimate concern when everybody talks about this lineup, they say, well, it's a good lineup if they stay healthy, like the if healthy thing. Do you think that is a legitimate concern?
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, I think it helps that, they do have some guys that still with, breakout potential for sure. I think the Mariners themselves are higher than on Dom Canzone than most, if not just about anyone. And we could debate that too. And part of it, I think, is that they probably need to pump him up, right? They traded their all-star closer, really, or stud closer to basically get Dom Canzone, and obviously Rojas coming in there, Ryan Bliss too, helped in that deal. But they need Dom Canzone to be a key part of this, right? Even if it's only as a platoon guy, 400, 500 at bats, like, they need him to be a viable guy, and that remains to be seen. Obviously, just came up for the first time as a rookie midway through last year. And he's one of those guys that obviously as a younger guy doesn't have those health concerns, but he is kind of factors in some of that too. Like, oh, if we can only get 90 games out of Mitch Haniger, we still feel good because, Dom Canzone can man left field, and we can move over Luke Raley over to right, obviously. And I do think we'll see that lineup anyway quite a bit against right-handers. And it is fascinating. And again, even a guy like Mitch Garver, professional hitter, a guy who's been around, he's got some pop. He was just in the World Series hitting third for a dynamic and deep Rangers lineup. There's a lot of reasons to be really excited about that. And think, oh, this guy can really, be that middle of the order bat, consistent bat that they need. But he's had those issues too, and they just don't know, right? You can say they've done all their homework that they wanted, that they needed to do on a Jorge Polanco too, and obviously they're not going to swing that kind of deal and give up what they gave up unless they feel pretty confident that it was sort of a fluke thing, that he's worked hard to, kind of push through that, and he's fully recovered now. And at the end of the day, they don't know too. Obviously, they have doctors and trainers that are looking at the medical evaluations, and they do all the testing with the guys. And so all they can do is, hey, this is what we've got. All indications are that things are going to be smooth for now, but you just never know. It's a long season. Guys play through a lot too. It's stuff we have no idea that they're playing through, and at some point they need to shut it down for whatever reason. But again, it's a high variance approach, high risk high reward sort of lineup. And if it sticks, if they all stay healthy, relatively healthy throughout the year, I think it has a chance to be pretty good, at least a little bit better than league average. And with this pitching staff, I think that's probably good enough to get them back in the postseason.